They didn't warn you about the quiet ones. They warned you about the loud ones, the aggressive ones, the ones who threaten you to your face, the ones who wear their anger like armor. But the person who truly dismantled someone's life took their position, their trust, their future. They did it with a smile. They did it while offering to help. That is the oldest trick in the game of power. And Machiavelli saw it 500 years ago with terrifying clarity. Here's the brutal truth. The most dangerous person in any room is not the one who looks dangerous. It is the one who has learned, deeply, patiently, deliberately, that looking harmless is the most powerful weapon available to a human being. Think about every betrayal you've ever experienced. Think carefully. Did it come from someone you feared? Or did it come from someone you never thought to watch? Machiavelli understood something about human nature that most of us spend our whole lives refusing to accept. He understood that the world is not divided between good people and bad people. It is divided between people who understand power and people who pretend power doesn't exist. And that pretending, that innocence, that naivety is not virtue. It is vulnerability, and the world will exploit it without mercy. There is a particular kind of person who has mastered this dynamic. You've met them. Maybe you're still recovering from one. They enter situations not with force, but with warmth. They ask questions, not because they're curious, but because information is ammunition. They listen when they speak. They remember everything. They seem to have no agenda whatsoever. And that apparent lack of agenda is, in itself, the agenda. Machiavelli wrote that it is better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both. But what he knew, and what most people miss, is that the truly elite operator doesn't choose between fear and love. They manufacture love while quietly building the capacity to be feared. They make you need them before you realize you've given them leverage. They make you trust them before you notice you've handed them the keys. This is not a movie villain strategy. This is Tuesday. This is the workplace. This is the family dinner table. This is the friendship group. This is everywhere power exists between human beings, which is to say, everywhere human beings exist at all. The harmless looking person operates on a principle that is almost painful in its simplicity. People protect what they see as threats, and they leave open what they believe is safe. If you never appear threatening, you are never guarded against. You can move through spaces, gather information, build alliances, and position yourself. All while the people around you are busy watching the loud, obvious dangers they've been conditioned to fear. And here is where it gets deeply uncomfortable. This is not only something done to you. This is something you may have done. We all perform harmlessness at times. We all downplay our ambition to avoid triggering someone else's defensiveness. We all smile when we're calculating. We all say no problem when something is absolutely a problem. The question isn't whether you've ever worn this mask. The question is, are you wearing it unconsciously as a reflex, or are you being worn by someone who chose it deliberately? Machiavelli's most misunderstood lesson was never about cruelty. It was about clarity. He was not teaching people to be evil. He was teaching people to stop being blind. He looked at the courts of Renaissance Italy, dripping with poison, betrayal, and shifting alliances, and he said, I will describe what is actually happening, not what we wish were happening. And 5 centuries later, we still find that honesty uncomfortable. Because here's what he was really saying. The world does not reward goodness. The world rewards effectiveness. And the most effective operators in any environment are the ones who understand that perception is reality, that optics are strategy, and that the person who controls how they are seen controls nearly everything. Now think about the most powerful person you've ever known personally. Not famous, personally. The person who always seemed to get what they wanted, who always landed on their feet, who somehow always came out ahead without ever seeming to try. Were they the loudest? Were they the most aggressive? Or were they the ones who knew when to go quiet, the ones who helped you when it was useful to them, the ones who seemed perfectly ordinary until you looked back and realized every move they made was a move? That is Machiavellian power in its purest form, not malicious cackling, not obvious manipulation, just a masterful, patient, almost invisible shaping of circumstances while looking the entire time like someone who just works here. There's a particular kind of danger in the person who never raises their voice, because volume is a form of vulnerability. When someone yells, you know what they want, you know where they stand, you know their emotional state, you have data. But the person who responds to every situation with calm, with measured words, careful smiles, and endless reasonableness gives you nothing. They are unreadable. And what you cannot read, you cannot prepare for. Silence is not peace. Stillness is not weakness. And in the arena of power, the person who makes you feel completely at ease has usually already figured out what they need from you. This is the warning Machiavelli whispers across centuries. Learn to see, not with your emotions, not with your wishful thinking, not with the version of people you want them to be, but with your eyes wide open to what people actually do. Actions over words, patterns over moments, what someone does when the pressure is on, who they become when there is something to gain. Watch not for what people say they value, but for what they sacrifice for and what they sacrifice others for. And then look at yourself with the same ruthlessness, because the final twist in Machiavelli's dark mirror is this. The most dangerous thing about understanding these patterns is what it reveals about your own behavior. The people who have manipulated you were not always monsters. Sometimes they were simply more awake than you. Sometimes they understood the game, while you were still insisting there was no game. The correction is not to become cynical, hollow, and paranoid. The correction is to become literate. Understand the language of power fluently enough that no one can use it against you without you knowing. Wear your virtue, but know where you keep your spine. Be warm, but never be readable. Give people reasons to trust you, but never give them reasons to underestimate you. The lion is feared, Machiavelli wrote, but the lion cannot protect itself from traps. For that, you need the fox. Be both. The most dangerous person in the room does not announce themselves. They do not need to. They have already read the room, mapped the exits, identified the alliances, and decided what they want, long before anyone else thought to look. The question is not whether people like this exist in your life. The question is whether you see them, and whether, when you look in the mirror, they see you back.